Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to South West London and News. I'm Michael Phillips.
And I'm Mariana Viveros, and we are covering the latest news, culture, and sports in South West London. Here are the latest news of today, and we will start with today's reviews papers.
So first of all, we're going to talk to Lauren today about some news stories. Lauren, the first story we're going to discuss today, I understand, is about the Plan B measures coming to an end. Tell me more.
Yes, that is correct. Boris Johnson has announced that England's Plan B measures are to end from next Thursday. Mandatory face coverings in public places and COVID passes are to be dropped. However, Sadiq Khan has said that passengers on London transports will still have to wear masks. It's expected that over 30% of Londoners are not vaccinated. Health Secretary Sajid Javid said in a news conference at Downing Street yesterday that today marks the next chapter of the UK's fight against COVID. From today, secondary pupils will no longer have to wear face masks in classrooms. However, teaching unions have expressed distress about the sudden change, saying that many schools are still facing disruptions due to COVID. A director of public health in the north of England said, "This feels more like a political decision rather than a decision based on the evidence and science, and it could be quite London-centric." Around 1 in 10 Londoners were expected to have had COVID in mid-December. However, COVID cases in London have significantly dropped and are down by up to 54%. The Prime Minister is also facing intense pressure to resign after being accused of misleading MPs about lockdown parties. Conservative MP Christian Wakeford defected to Labour, calling it the hardest decision I've ever had to make.
Dramatic stuff, Lauren. Thank you very much. The second story we're going to be talking about today, I understand, is about a London man who's been arrested in Surrey after a boy was stabbed in Caterham. Tell me more.
Yes, really awful story. A 15-year-old boy has been stabbed in Caterham and is currently in hospital with serious injuries. The attack happened around 9 p.m. on Tuesday on Stafford Road, at the end of an alleyway which links to Croydon Road. A 25-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm, but has since been released. A police cordon remained in place until yesterday lunchtime. In 2021, London recorded its worst ever annual death toll from teenage homicides with a total of 30. This exceeded the 2008 peak of 29. Patrick Green, chief executive of Knife Charity, said, "Knife crime is accepted by this generation as part and parcel of growing up, and that's totally unacceptable."
Shocking stuff, Lauren. Thank you very much. And finally today, we're going to be talking about Netflix. I understand they've gifted a bench to a park in our neck of the woods. Tell me more about that, please.
Yes, Afterlife has donated mental health benches that are going to be across the whole country, and 6 of them are going to be in London. One of them will be at Twickenham's York House Gardens. The benches will have QR codes which will lead people to online resources and messages of support. Suicide prevention charity Calm said, "We know benches are a great place where you can reflect, talk to someone, sit shoulder to shoulder with someone and get things off your chest." In 2020, there were 5,224 registered deaths of suicide in England and Wales. Lockdowns have had a major impact on mental health, and especially on younger generations and women, which was led by a study in the University of Glasgow.
Okay, Lauren, thank you very much.
And now we have Logan, and he's going to talk us about sports today. Can you tell us about the Australia Opening results?
Yeah, so Andy Murray, Heather Watson and Emma Raducanu have all made second round exits at the Australian Open. Murray lost in straight sets to Japan's Toru Daniel, leaving Dan Evans as the last Brit in the men's singles. Heather Watson also lost in straight sets to Slovenia's Tamara Zidansek, which means she has now lost her twice in quick succession after they played last week in Adelaide. And most recently, Emma Raducanu is the latest Brit to exit after a 3-set defeat to Danka Kovacic earlier today. Also in tennis news, women players are urging for more information on the Chinese player Peng Shuai, who posted allegations of sexual assault against a former politician. These players are clearly worried and genuinely concerned over her safety and whereabouts. And it kind of feels like the whole community in tennis is coming together to help resolve the situation, which hopefully means it's only a matter of time before she is found.
And tell us more about the Premier League. What's happening?
Yeah, so big news in the Premier League in recent days is that they're considering whether to change the rules over match postponements. Over the past few weeks, we've seen quite a lot of games postponed for a number of reasons, including like COVID cases, injuries, and obviously because there's the Africa Cup of Nations, so the players that are African are playing in these tournaments. Squads are cut. Some people believe that these clubs are manipulating the system to get these games postponed to their advantage. So it's caused a bit of uproar. The current guidance states that the games should go ahead if a team can field a goalkeeper and 13 outfield players, but there are still 20 games that need to be rearranged as a result of these postponements. So I think the longer this situation goes on, the worse it's going to get.
Right, thank you, Logan, and thank you, Lauren. And our broadcast editor, Michael, has been looking at the rise in drinking and needle spiking across southwest London. He spoke to a victim of this horrible crime. Here's his report.
If you're over 18, chances are you've been to a nightclub. However, since the pandemic, there has been a significant rise in the number of people having their drink spiked. We spoke to Nikki, someone who had their drink spiked on a night out with friends. Here's her experience.
Went out with a few girls and people from work, absolutely fine. Went to Wetherspoons for a few drinks and absolutely fine. Went to another pub. I was okay. Had a drink at the bar, and then next minute my eyes started rolling in the back of my head. I just remember going to the pub, having a few drinks. I was absolutely fine talking to these people, and then I don't remember nothing after that.
How did you feel the next day when you woke up?
Like I've been hit by a bus. Normally I can have a drink and I'll be up next day for work, but it took me 4 days to basically get out of bed. It took me 2 months before I could go out, and then I've been out with family. I haven't been out with friends since. Watch your drink. Even if it's a bottle or glass, just make sure you got your hand over it and just watch your drink, because they can do, literally I just turned my head and that was it. The thing is, it's you that can only do it, not the pubs.
I think it's definitely, it is a risk because it happens to a lot of people. I know quite a lot of people that have been spiked while they've been going out. And, the more you read about it on the news, the scarier it is. It happens, and it can happen to everyone. And, there's things you can do to protect yourself from it. But ultimately, you don't want to be covering your drink the whole night. And you can't be constantly thinking about that because you just want to enjoy yourself. We would never, put our drinks down and come back to it. If we go to the loo, one of us will hold the drinks for everyone. To be honest, we don't really walk around with an empty drink. Normally a bottle, and you put your thumb over the bottle, or you carry it like that so it's covered. But I mean, even then, people could slip stuff in. To be fair, when we're out, we drink at the bar quickly and then go and dance, then go back to get another drink. I would never really carry a drink around with me. The thought of someone injecting you while you're out, there's literally nothing you can do about that. And also, my friend who did get spiked, there was no motivation for it. She was with friends. Luckily, she was safe and we got her sorted and an ambulance called. But there was no possible, reason to spike her other than perhaps a humiliator. I don't know. It's hard to, think about why people actually do it. Are they just being nasty? To protect yourself the most, you just need to make sure that you're out with people that you trust and that are going to check that you get home safe. Because if we weren't with her, I don't know what would have happened. The venue that we were in was amazing. I think they did a full investigation and they looked all through CCTV. But I've also been out with friends where they've been horrible and they haven't taken it seriously. So I think it depends on the place. I've heard a lot of bad things about certain clubs from back home, and it depends on the place, but they need to do more and it needs to be enforced.
Many nightclubs are now providing tools to help prevent your drink from being spiked. One nightclub near Kingston was providing film lids to go on top of your drink, which act as a barrier. You then simply pop your straw in the top, helping you to enjoy your night and stay protected.
Even at the hospital, my friend was told that it was her fault because she was drinking all the time. It's always your fault you weren't dressed appropriately, or you're leaving your drink unattended. You should be able to leave your drink unattended. Just look after your friends, make sure they all get home safe. If someone's slightly more drunk than everyone else, make sure they're not walking home on their own, they're not getting a cab home on their own. And if you do think that they seem to be acting a bit different, or they start to look a bit sick, make sure you get them to a safe space. That's why I think this the whole progression on the news and like social media channels talking about and discussing spiking. I mean, that's brought more attention to it than uni ever have, or any official bodies ever have. It's all of the girls sharing stuff online about recognising the signs, like kits you can get to test your drinks, stuff like that.
Do you know many people who have had their drinks spiked?
In the past, yes, but the same weekend I had my drink spiked, 3 other people had their drinks spiked as well.
What would you say to your friends who are going out drinking?
Just keep an eye on your drink and just watch your drinks. That's why it puts me off clubs. It puts me off going out. You go out for a few drinks and you want to go with friends and then you get spiked. I think it's disgusting.
Has it made you think twice about going out?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Are you always aware now of what's around you?
Yeah, and it makes me feel like I don't want to go out.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for coming. What are the measures that have been taken in place to prevent the the drinking spike?
So there's a range of different measures in place depending on what nightclub you go to. Some have litmus papers available, so you can test your drink to see if it's been spiked and see if there's a noxious substance in there. Also, there's some nightclubs have like these things called spikies. So if you, for example, you've got a bottle of some description that you're drinking, obviously a small bottle, and you can just put the little, it's like a little colour. Some of them may come like in different colours. You can just put it at the top and put your straw in, and that stops anything from getting in there. There's also basic awareness of different of your drink being spiked. So, for example, if you've got a drink of lemonade or something with ice in it, if someone spiked it, 9 times out of 10, the ice sinks to the bottom of the drink. So to make sure your drink's not been spiked, also you should always make sure that the ice is floating on top of your drink. And also if it's cloudy, it could potentially have been spiked, so make sure you don't drink it. So there's a range of tools on social media telling you about these sort of signs that your drink could have been spiked, for example.
And how effective are they?
So they are, obviously this is still happening. So I think there needs to be more awareness of these tools available and to know the signs. And I think hopefully people, so younger people of our generation, sharing this on social media should help this to become more effective, and hopefully therefore the figures on drink spiking should decrease.
And going to a nightclub, like we've seen on your video, how was your experience inside the club?
So when I went to the club, it wasn't very busy, but this because it was a weekday. But you can instantly tell if you was to go to a nightclub and it's really busy. It's definitely hard to keep an eye on your drink at all times. You have to make sure you have to have your whereabouts about you. So you have to know what's around you, who's around you, and you should always be keeping an eye on your drink. That's obviously hard, and this is the problem. It's hard to keep an eye on your drink at all times when you're trying to have fun. But there's two parallels, because you've got to keep an eye on it and you've got to have fun at the same time. So obviously keeping it close and making sure people around you, you know the people around you. And if you're around people you don't know, think about letting them buy you a drink. Think about what they could be doing, because people's motives cannot always be clear.
Right. And what should more be taking place to combat spiking?
So at the moment, there's currently a review taking place by the Home Affairs Select Committee, carrying out, and it's a cross-party inquiry. It's looking at drink spiking, and it's speaking to a range of people affected. This is quite a big issue, and one MP who is on the committee, Tim Lawton, he's a Conservative MP, he has said that the findings of this inquiry should conclude by the end of this week, and there's going to be recommendations put forward by the government. Some of the victims have said that they are treated like they have taken drugs to their own volition, and they are not offered a drugs. They're not offered a drugs test there and then. And one person who has spoken about this recently is Love Island star Sharon Gafka. She's been speaking on TikTok and saying how when she was, before obviously she was famous, she was in A&E suspected drink spiking, and nobody actually offered her a drugs test. The blame was put solely on her, and because she went out to have fun, she was responsible, when 9 times out of 10 people who have been spiked, it's not their fault. So I think there needs to be more awareness in A&E and in hospital settings of people who have been spiked, and that it is not actually their fault. They've just gone out to have a good night.
Right. This is more of a women's. It's more common in women's. As a man, how should men speak about it?
And I think men need to understand that women could be fearful of this happening. I mean, if you look at the figures, for example, from the Alcohol Trust, only 7% of men have been spiked, whereas that is more than double in women at 15%, and only 8% of those incidents have actually, of all drink spiking incidents, have been reported, because people are worried that they're going to be blamed for the condition that they're in. So obviously, clearly, it's more of an issue in women, because men like to. A lot of women have said, who have got taken part in drink spiking, as you saw in my report there, a lot of women say that it's because men want to make them look silly and they want to make them look vulnerable. So I think there needs to be a conversation between an open conversation about why men want to do this, because there's, as you saw in my report, it damages people's lives, and people are scared about going out because they could be spiked. You saw needle spikings on the rise. That's also another issue, that women are now scared. So they've got, not only have they got to keep an eye on the drink, they've got to keep an eye on who's around them, because you never know, you could be spiked with a needle. And it says more figures from the Alcohol Trust, that 1 in 10 people who were spiked were students. So it's clearly a common issue around our age group.
Right, and on your video you had Nikki, and she suffered from this horrible crime.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel when she was telling you what happened?
I mean, it's absolutely shocking to think that she literally just went out for an innocent drink with some friends, and it turned into one of the most traumatic events in her life. She doesn't want to go out anymore. She's adamant that she doesn't want to go out because she doesn't know what could happen. It scarred her for life. It took her 4 days to recover. And I think this sort of press coverage helps people to become aware of how damaging this crime can be. And it might seem like an innocent joke to someone, but for someone else, them not being in control, she can't remember that night. She's scarred for life after that incident. So yeah, it's very, very shocking. And unfortunately, these figures, I don't think are going to go away anytime soon. Hopefully, the measures that the Home Affairs Select Committee inquiry will look at, there might be some measures put in place that can help prevent this in future. I think there's definitely needs to be more checks before you go into clubs to make sure people aren't carrying any substances, because at the end of the day, I think it's down to clubs to keep people safe, so that they can't so that people can't get spiked and these incidents can't keep happening.
And my last question for you, why is drink spiking in the increase?
I think ever since the pandemic, I think people have clearly got bored at home, and they think it's a prank, they want some entertainment. And I just think clearly the drugs are available on the internet. Maybe people need to look at why these drugs are available and what can be done to stop them being sold and this incident happening.
Right, thank you very much, Michael.
So next up today, our ethnic minority editor Rahima went to a black culture market in Brixton.
Here's her report.
Come to Brixton's Black Culture Christmas Market to find out more about it and hear the thoughts and opinions of some of the business owners.
I'm Jen, and I'm the founder and organiser of Black Culture Market. So the Black Culture Market was set up 3 years ago. It started off as a one-off event for Black History Month in Brixton to support new businesses in the area, those that maybe haven't had so many opportunities to expose themselves, get feedback. So it was a one-off event, but it was so successful that the demand has grown, and I've just continued since then. What I hope to achieve is, again, to just make sure that the Black Pound stays within the Black community, that people can access products that represent themselves, whether it's kids wear, toys, educational materials, hair care, skin care. It's just having that community and that outlet of the products from our culture. I'm from Brixton, so I've established Black Culture Market in Brixton because of that reason. Also, Brixton is known as the hub of the African Caribbean community, so it kind of just made perfect sense to start the first one there. I'm of African Caribbean descent, so what I find so special about the culture is the variety, the different influences from other cultures as well, the music, the food, the colours, the clothing is so unique and distinctive that it is a really special culture and community. My favourite part of the culture is definitely the music, and it's obviously it's not just contained to African and Caribbean people. It's very popular, it's worldwide, and it's an entry point for people to get to know more about African and Caribbean culture through the music. I think over the years, it's getting better that more high street retailers and owners are embracing African Caribbean culture a lot more. There's still a long way to go, but I'm definitely seeing more and more opportunities opening up on the high street. I think retailers can become more inclusive by giving people a chance, but at the same time I fully understand that I feel like some people also need to present their product in a way that is appealing to the mass market as well. So I think it goes hand in hand. I don't think it's necessarily the fault of one side or the other. I think it's a collaboration of both. I think that even the traders that I work with do need a lot of hand-holding sometimes to get their product or their businesses up to a certain level. But I feel like if there's more support, then both sides can flourish. So we've just done our Christmas market, and in the future we're going to be having more events. So next year another 4 events in the spring and the summer. We might have some more pop-up shops in different locations, and yeah, we'll see from there what the demand is.
I am Sherelle. I'm the founder of Black greeting cards and stationery brand Kitchener. I created Kitchener 4 years ago because there was nothing like it in the greeting cards industry. I could never find cards with black or brown people on that made me feel represented. So I decided to make Kitchener, and now it's developed into a stationery brand which helps customers to stay organised and keep their workspace aesthetically pleasing and nice to be in. I love that I get to meet up with the other traders and we can talk about our experiences, and I love meeting up with new customers as well and being introduced to new customers. It's helped me to reach out to new customers, as I said, and it's helped me to just touch base with all the other businesses, and I've been introduced to new businesses as well that I can shop with, and it's just helped me to raise brand awareness really.
Hi there, my name's Claude and I run Hudson's of London. It's a men's accessories brand, so we cater in pocket squares, bow ties and pocket watches and socks. We literally sell accessories for guys because girls have loads of accessories, so why can't the guys do it too? And we especially brand for weddings, and you know, if you're going out to somewhere special, then come to us and we've got you. I think it's very unique where you showcase a lot of brands where, you know, time like lockdown, you are, you know, stuck and you don't know what to do. So something like the Black Culture Market, it exposes you, and it's, you know, it can actually boost your sales, and it's got a lovely footfall as well. So, you know, you're reaching people that you can't really get. So I think it's really good for the culture as well.
Hello, my name is Alicia and my business is Alicia Francis, named after me. I design and make handmade knitwear. It's just so nice to celebrate black culture and black designers, and everyone that comes down being really supportive. It's great, they've got a good platform, so it's been nice to be able to reach a broader audience, so that's been great, and everyone so far who I've met today has been lovely.
The Black Culture Market is a much-loved event that celebrates the vibrancy of African and Caribbean culture and commerce, and it will be returning later this year. Rahima Mia, South West London.
Thank you, Rahima, for coming. I just want to say I love the video. It looks so colourful, like great. And tell me the difference between a Christmas market to the traditional ones.
So the Black Culture Christmas Market exclusively showcased Black entrepreneurs and Black designers. All the products were specific to Black culture, and there was a huge range of products from jewellery to greeting cards to skincare products. So there was a lot of things that you could buy. And I felt like there was more of a focus on the people who made the products rather than the products themselves. So in a traditional Christmas market, you go for the products and you don't really know much about who made them. Often you don't even know their name. So that's one big difference I noticed in the Black Culture Christmas market compared to traditional ones.
And what did you find surprising about the market, Rahima?
Well, there were more male designers than I thought there would be. The majority of fashion designers are women, so it was nice to see some male designers at the Black Culture Christmas market. And two of the male designers who I spoke to were Claude Hudson, who was featured in the video, and Nathaniel Williams. Claude Hudson is the founder of Hudson's of London, which is a men's accessories brand. He designs pocket watches, bow ties, socks, and accessories for occasions. And Nathaniel's brand is called Ashore, and it's called Ashore because he sees people from around the world from Black African origin as different threads which come together to form a cloth. And ashore is the word for cloth, so that's why he named his brand that.
Oh, wow, sounds very interesting. And obviously, you focused on Black culture. Tell me why. How is such an important topic to cover?
I think it's important because ethnic minorities generally don't get a lot of coverage in the media, or if they do, it's sometimes negative coverage. So I think it's important to show ethnic minorities in a positive light. And I also think it's important to raise awareness of ethnic minority individuals and groups, and that's something that I think the Black Culture Market does really well.
And what can we expect from the next Christmas market?
So the next market will be held on Saturday the 5th of March and Sunday the 6th of March. It's going to be at the same location as the Christmas market, so downstairs at the department store in Brixton. There's going to be food, fashion, gifts, and it's a free event. You can find out more information on Black Culture Market's website, which is www.blackculturemarket.co.uk.
And what does the future hold for Black culture in London?
So, as Jan mentioned in the video, Brixton is the hub of the African and Caribbean community in London. So I expect that Black culture will continue to thrive there, and hopefully with events held by the Black Culture Market, more people will learn about Black culture and be engaged in it.
Thank you, Rahima. Up, our next culture editor, Joe, has been to an art gallery at a house in Twickenham. Here's his report.
Down a quiet Twickenham side street, in what was once a 19th century beer house, artist Kath Wood has turned her home into an art gallery. Wood, who also leads a visual arts agency, is a respected consultant and curator. In December, her domestic venue Art at Home ran the pop-up show 6 Artists, 6 Days, catering for those who wish to buy affordable art for their own home. She set up shop and residence in 2019 with the intention of demystifying the art buying process for people who are perhaps lost or intimidated in traditional galleries.
I wanted to make a new place for people to come and look at art in a domestic setting, to encourage them to buy work for their homes, meet the artist in a relaxed environment. It's great living amongst all the artworks. I'm really lucky. I can get to change how it looks every week or every month, and I really enjoy it. So I think we've really made a start at demystifying the process of buying art for people's homes. People do feel relaxed when they come in, and they can imagine the work in their own sitting rooms or dining rooms because it's a similar scale. So it's a big project, but I think we made a really good start. Well, I've worked in a lot of big public galleries during my career, and what I wanted to do by opening up my home is make it a more relaxed environment for people to view art in a different kind of setting that's not a conventional art gallery. Well, they're similar in price often, but the print from IKEA might be an edition, so it might be an edition of 50 or 100 or 500, and the artworks that you buy at Art at Home are all unique and one-offs. That's really the main difference. So my house is actually an old pub, so it was an old beer house. It's built about 1810. It's called the British Lion, and so I wanted to give it some public life back. So the room that we're in, that we use for the gallery, was the old public bar. So it is quite a big space, sort of like a very large sitting room. So that means that we can show a lot of work. So sometimes we can show as many as 40 pieces of work. Well, it doesn't look like that. So it's quite deceptive about how much we can get in. So over the summer, we did a different artist every week. So every weekend, it was completely different. So we had quilting, we had glass, we had painting. So the space felt really different every single week. So it's great.
Yeah, so I was there in August, and being based in Yorkshire, obviously it's quite far north, so things are a lot further on in Twickenham than where I was. So the first sort of acorns of the year and conkers were there. So my process is called the burnout process, or lost organic casting. So it's quite an ancient technique, but you're literally making a mould around the real object and then burning it out so that it turns to ash, which allows you to melt the glass into the empty space left in the mould. So they're the closest you can get to the real thing in terms of texture and form. So it's a bit like alchemy. I always say a bit like a modern alchemist, because it's like a magic trick, turning things into glass. Yeah, it was really interesting meeting Kath, because the choices she's made in her living space are very personal, and her colour sense and is really great. And you can see that when you talk to her by, you know, the clothes she wears and the jewellery and things. So it's a fascinating thing. And I think you just get something that's mass produced is right for some people, but I think, like, I don't know, during the pandemic, I think there isn't anyone that hasn't watched a film or listened to music, or that art hasn't been important to them in some way, art and culture. It's what's sort of got us all through it, really. And that sort of, it's the thing that often gets cut when, you know, money has to be trimmed from somewhere, but actually it's something that we all need, because it's not just an extra frivolous thing. It helps us see the world in a different way, and tells us about our own culture and histories and geographies, and it's that complex relationship between those different kinds of things that's really important. And they can go to a gallery that they trust and will always have interesting work sort of made by people who work in a sort of authentic way with integrity.
So there you have it. The future of accessible art is residential, and already many artists are calling art at home their home. Joe Marshall, Southwest Londoner.
So Joe, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And first question, I guess today, first of all, is I'd like to ask is, how did you feel walking around the home?
Well, it was a really captivating experience. I didn't expect to step off from a residential area into such a vibrant and colourful place. And I found it really exciting just walking around, seeing all the different artworks and the range of stuff that was on display.
Obviously, this is quite different from a gallery because it is inside a house.
Yeah.
Tell me, what grabbed your attention when you were inside?
Well, as I said, the sheer variety of creative pieces. I think the most noticeable artwork was also very colourful and striking. It was a lino print by Del Devereux Baker, and what he did was he took an antique painting and then he overlaid it with this sort of kaleidoscopic visual. It was almost like something on Tumblr, as if he had remixed this old painting, and I just found that very captivating.
And what artworks from the collection would you think belong in actual art galleries? So what were some of your favourite pieces?
Well, as I said, Del Devereux Baker's work was very impressive. I also enjoyed the work of Effie Burns, who I spoke to in my video. She takes little objects and trinkets like acorns and conkers, and then she casts them in glass, and she produced these multicolored glass sculptures, which are very unusual because you can pick them up with your hand and touch them and hold them, which you can't normally do in a gallery. They had this sort of otherworldly feel. And then I should also say, just exploring upstairs in Kath's actual living quarters, I was equally taken by. Just the way that she's decorated her own house, and I suppose there's a sort of overlap between the art that she puts on display and the art, in the space where she actually lives.
And what is the balance between feeling at home and being in an art gallery?
Yes, on the one hand, you had all the mental and the emotional effects of being surrounded by art, as I mentioned, but at the same time, Kath and the woman that she works with, Grace, who's a press officer, and her mother was there as well when I first visited, and it was very much like going around to a neighbour's house for a cup of tea. They invited me into the kitchen. They told me the history of the space, how it used to be a Limehouse pub, and I just felt very welcome. And I really saw the domestic side and the arty side as well, the business side, I suppose you could call it.
And Joe, how does it differ from the traditional gallery experience?
Well, often when you visit a gallery, not so much a large one like the Tate, which is more geared towards tourists or lay people, but in somewhere small like Tate, somewhere in Notting Hill, for instance, the experience can be quite stuffy. There's an air of pretension, and I think people feel intimidated, especially when it comes to buying art for their own homes. Um, and this can obviously provoke an adverse reaction, and they think art isn't for them. And this really differed from that. You could chat to the artists, they would explain to you about their process, and there was no pressure to buy. They didn't go in for the hard sell or anything like that.
Thank you, Joe.
So next up, we're talking sustainable fashion.
Our fashion editor, Lauren O'Toole, has been talking to owner of Pret a Vintage in southwest London. Here's her report.
Popularity of vintage fashion has increased massively over the last few years. A 2020 report from second-hand sales platform ThreadUp estimated that by 2023, the resale market will account for 10% of the total retail market. Nicola Chin, owner of Pret a Vintage, started sourcing her pieces in 2009 and believes people are becoming more aware of the damage fast fashion has on the planet.
I think nobody realised in the past how damaging clothing production was for the planet, and now it's, as people have become aware, they're obviously moving away from fast fashion, and it's a quality thing as well. I mean, the problem is once you've dealt in vintage and you've touched it, seen the quality and seen the construction, even from things that didn't cost much money when they were made in perhaps the 60s or the 70s, those things are such better quality than the stuff you get on the high street now. A lot of the fashion has been recently overtly 70s and 80s, your sort of prairie dresses, which has come, obviously the designers have been influenced by the likes of Laura Ashley from the 70s, and there's lots of big sleeves and puffy shoulders, fitted bodices and full skirts with layers. That's very much influenced by the 70s. The designers have used it, and then that means that people are looking for vintage that looks like the stuff that's in the shops at the moment. So so the vintage has influenced the creation of the modern day garments, which then inspires people to buy vintage as a cheaper and better way of having a current look. It's great that youngsters, sort of teenagers, have discovered vintage. I mean, I remember playing in my grandma's closet when I was a kid, and putting her shoes on and putting her coats on and stuff like that. And I think we all sort of tend to go through that. But now it's great to see so many youngsters, and it's not just that they're buying and selling as well. They're buying vintage, but they're also reselling it when they don't wear it, which is really good. I know a lot of youngsters now who instinctively go in charity shops, where you get some people who are like, oh no, I'm not buying my clothes in a charity shop. And it's like, well, actually, it's a great way to buy clothing for youngsters who haven't got much money.
Nicola also talked me through some of her favourite pieces that she has at the moment.
Silk print dress, probably from, well, I was told it was from 1939, so by Sydney End of New York, pure silk, hand printed, and it's just the movement in it. It's quite tiny, it's for a tiny person, probably about a size 6, but just the detail and the ruching here under the waist, and just the way it moves, it's going to look amazing on a body. Things like this little Edwardian dress, I mean, it's not particularly the weather for it at the moment, but they're getting harder to come by in good condition, so it's really nice and they're just such beautiful details, and the thought that, it would have been hand done, and just in the fact that it survived such a long time. This is a Eastern European embroidered shearling waistcoat, and that's all done by hand I mean, you just probably couldn't get that now unless you were buying something for many thousands of pounds from a design house, one of the big design houses.
A crucial element of vintage fashion are the vintage fairs such as Frock Me, which has been running since 1997.
Vintage fairs are really key in giving access to the very small micro businesses, crazy people like me. For the customer, being able to go to a vintage fair like Frock Me and know that the work curating and getting the people there and they're like selecting the dealers that are going to give the best cross section of vintage and the best sort of display, if you like.
I dived into the middle of the Frock Me Fashion Fair to speak to Louise, owner of Hope and Harlequin, which was voted one of the Telegraph's best vintage shops in Britain in 2020.
Frock Me is fantastic. It's really, it's such a great fair and it always does such a buzz. So many people come through the door who are absolutely just appreciating what we're selling, and you collect like crazy for it as well. So you always bring your best pieces, to all the London fairs, and you get people who are really dedicated to wearing vintage and like wearing sustainable fashion, and they want something different and special. It's not like the high street. You can't just go onto the high street and buy this kind of stuff usually, and it's quite a niche market and there's not a great number of people who do it, so it brings together all of those things.
Vintage fashion seems like it is a trend that is certainly here to stay. This is Lauren O'Toole reporting for South West Londoner.
So Lauren, some very interesting pieces in that report. First of all, when you went to the fair, what was your initial reaction?
My first thought was how big the fair was. It was absolutely buzzing with people, clothes, designers, and it really highlights the importance that vintage fairs have in supporting the increase in sustainable and vintage fashion. Fairs are a great way to get started on your journey with vintage fashion, whether this is browsing through the racks, talking to the designers, looking at the clothes. I mean, fairs like Frock Me has been running since 1997. I wasn't aware of that because only in the last few years has the popularity really increased.
Right, so the popularity increased, and what is the need for sustainable vintage fashion?
Well, sustainable fashion creates fashion which is more considerate of humanity and the environment. Fast fashion is so damaging on the environment. I mean, greenhouse gas emissions, fashion causes 10% of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions and 20% of global wastewater. Sustainable brands, however, use fabrics that are recycled, are second-hand, and are not going to harm the environment. Sometimes sustainable fashion may be a little bit more expensive than your fast brands, but they are clothes that will stay in your wardrobe for years. And recently there has been a real turn against fast fashion. I think we are all becoming more aware of the damage these clothes can have on the economy, and buying dresses that you may only wear once or a couple of pounds. These dresses can't be a couple of pounds. What about the workers? What about the conditions? So we need to be more aware of the people and the environment.
So what is engaging the younger audience about vintage fashion, and how can they get more into the vintage fashion industry?
Well, younger audiences have really embraced sustainable and vintage fashion. They actually account for 40% of the total consumers for vintage fashion. I think for younger audiences, it really is a great way of achieving a cheaper look. They can buy second-hand, they can go on sites such as Depop. Sites such as Depop have really increased over the last few years, with some of the throwback trends that have come back, like oversized blazers, fanny packs, bike shorts, and you can find these for cheaper on sites such as Depop, which are second-hand and pre-loved.
We've seen on your video unique pieces. And what interests you in vintage fashion?
What I love about vintage fashion is the expression and uniqueness it allows you to portray. You don't have to wear everything vintage fashion. You could wear a simple bracelet or earrings or shoes, and it gives your outfit a bit of a vintage twist. You're not likely to see someone walking down the high street in the same clothes as you are with some of the high street brands, where you might see 10 people wearing the same jacket as you. And with vintage fashion, there's such a story with the clothes as well. These were once pre-loved items by people who may have had them for years, and whether it's unique from the story it has, or the year it was from, or who wear it.
So if I had an outfit, for example, How would I be able to resell it if I no longer want it?
Well, there is actually loads of sites where you can now sell your clothes, whether this is Depop, Spock, eBay. I mean, personally for me, I've really got into selling my clothes in the last 2 years, and going on these online sites is so easy. You pop the clothes up and it can be sold. Another great way is to head down to your local charity shop. I mean, charity shops are always looking for donations. And then whilst you're there, you can also have a browse through at the items they have on sale as well.
And do you own anything vintage?
I actually don't own anything vintage. I need to up my game in the vintage fashion. I do own some clothes that my nan has passed down to me, such as earrings or a necklace, but after doing this video, I really will be heading down to some of the vintage fairs near me, such as Frock Me.
Thank you, Lauren.
So next up today, our food and drink editor, Mariana Viveiros, has been exploring Portuguese food in Stockwell. Here's her report.
How authentic is Portuguese food? I have travelled all the way to Madeira to show you a little bit of some of the dishes that they make. I have limpets, fish and some homemade biscuits. Back in London, I spoke to a Portuguese restaurant owner, O Cantinho de Portugal.
My name is Diogo de Reis. I am 28 years old. Came over to England when I was 4 years old, and I became the owner of Cantinho in June 2019. Cantinho has been around since 91, 92. My parents owned it 8 years ago. This is about as authentic as you get when it comes to Portuguese food. From the food to the people to the design, everything is as Portuguese as it gets. The produce is Portuguese. A lot of the products you can't buy here anyway. You're looking at like small pieces of grains, small compal, from sort of drinks to beans to vegetables. Most of it comes from Portugal. Because the Portuguese clientele can tell when it's not. Well, they keep coming back, so something must be good. They must be a little bit happy. Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting better and better. I think the customers are also, they want more. They want better design plates. They want a better ambient to come into. So we're trying to keep up with what the current market wants. And that is just a better service in general. And that makes them happier. So. The cooking, I'd say in Portugal you have better access to raw materials, so vegetables and fruit, better quality there I'd say. In the UK it's much harder to find at a good price as well. So in Portugal you get better ingredients, better prices. Here you have to limit maybe your menu to the good quality ingredients that you can find on a regular. It's getting that consistent quality product that's quite difficult in the UK, I find. Unless you're going to be paying hundreds of pounds for something that, in Portugal you find for £2. So in the kitchen, everyone is Portuguese, or of Portuguese descent. So yeah, everyone here is essentially Portuguese. That's quite natural. There's a few things that people, when they come in, they know it's Portuguese, from the TVs on the wall to the music that's being played. Portuguese people are naturally a little bit louder than English people, so you can tell straight away when a Portuguese person is talking. I think you can just tell. You can just tell as soon as you come in and you see a massive Molotov in your face, you're like, yeah, that's definitely Portuguese. And Cantinho has gone through about 4 different families have owned Cantinho since the beginning, in about 30 years. Each family has sort of added their own touch into the restaurant. I'd say since we took over sort of 8 years ago, my parents took over 8 years ago, we've probably made the most radical amount of changes since the beginning. It sort of stayed the same, design-wise at least, for a long time. And then my parents came in and quite a few changes were made. I'd say the quality's gotten a little bit better in the last few years as well, because we're really trying to focus on just being the best Portuguese restaurant in the UK. And to do that, we're trying to get as good as we can. From the quality of the ingredients to design on the plates, to better promotions, better understanding of what the people actually want, so what our customers need as well. We always have to maintain our food at a certain price range for the community. It's very important for us. But it doesn't mean that. It means that we then have to be very creative in the pace that we design in order to maintain that price level, but also provide something that can reach the table and be like, wow, this is great, this is something different, but maintain the traditionalness that is a Portuguese dish. There aren't many Portuguese restaurants in London. Well, there are a few, but I mean of this size, I think there's only 3 or 4 or 5. They're all family owned, most of them at least, and they're all very traditional. And Cantinho has a long tradition within London, and it's very well known within the community as representing Portuguese food the most authentic way possible, and that's what we want to maintain. I'd always want to stay within sort of the Sunwell, Brixton, Little Portugal is where we need to be. If we're representing Portuguese food, Portuguese people, Portuguese culture, we need to be where, at the middle of where we are. I think it's great. I think there's good and bad from sort of new restaurants. The more the better, I think, when it comes to Portuguese food. I think we're widely misrepresented within the world, let alone London and the UK. I think a lot of people don't understand what Portuguese food is, or they think it's maybe just Nando's or something like that, when it can be further from the truth. However, we're very bad at promoting our culture and our food, and they're both incredible. So the more the merrier, if they are representing us in the right way. I think when I hear someone think that Portuguese food is Nando's, I think that's just our fault for not representing ourselves better. I think Nando's is great. I think what they've done is incredible. Their branding, their expansion throughout the whole world is incredible. We need to do that more. We need to be able to expand and to really showcase the best of Portuguese culture. And to do that, we need more restaurants, more events, more festivals, and we can only do that by getting all together and doing that.
Oh my God, Mariana, that chocolate cake looks delicious.
It's called Brigadeiro de Chocolate.
Oh,
like the Portuguese version, obviously.
Oh, it was delicious. I could eat that. First question today. Where in London could we find the highest demographic of people and Portuguese food?
Well, you can find them mainly in Stockwell, which is South London, where you can find loads and loads of Portuguese restaurants that are family owned. And even the community itself is just mainly based in Stockwell.
How can Portuguese food become more mainstream? So, particularly, obviously, we've seen the rise in Nando's. How can other Portuguese restaurants become more successful?
Well, as a Portuguese person, I don't believe that Nando's is Portuguese. Yes, it might have, 1 or 2 dishes, but it's not with Portuguese ingredients. It's not made by Portuguese people, where in Stockwell, the Portuguese restaurants, they are made with Portuguese food that come from Portugal, and you can have a Portuguese person actually making them.
You can't beat a cheeky Nando's, though. Why should someone try Portuguese food?
Well, I took my friends to my parents' house, and my mom cooked some Portuguese food, and they loved it. And then I decided to take them to a Portuguese restaurant in Stockwell, and they didn't see a difference. Obviously, the food is still great, but between my mom is Portuguese, and going to a Portuguese restaurant, they didn't see much of a difference, and they loved it because you have a little bit of everything. If you are more into fish, you can have fish. If you prefer meat, you can have meat, or even like the desserts and everything. You have really great desserts.
Maybe your mom should consider opening her own restaurant, though. How popular is Portuguese food in London?
I believe it could be more popular than it is. I feel like it's up to the Portuguese restaurants owners to use social media, adverts, and even like Portuguese people like myself. And like I took my friends, one is from Kenya, one is British, and I took them and they absolutely loved it. So if you can share it as much as you can, why not?
So I know what my favourite food would be if I was to pick my favourite Portuguese dish. What are some of your favourite dishes, though?
Well, as you've seen on the video, I love limpets. Absolutely love that. That's from where I'm from. Desserts itself, I like pastel de nata, which is like a custard thing. And I really like octopus as well. I mean, I could eat anything at this point.
Me too. Thank you very much, Mariana, for speaking to us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next, we're going to be speaking to our gaming editor, Amelia Oprium. She's been talking to gaming experts on the positive effects of gaming on mental health and how the industry has been changing.
Here's her report.
In the UK, around 50% of gamers are female and 70% are over the age of 18. Could this be you? Gamer Olivia and Opinium's gaming research expert Andy can tell us more about their opinions and experiences. Have a look.
I feel like a lot of people feel that video games take up a lot of time and you should be focusing on other responsibilities that you have, for example, schoolwork, and I feel like video games can be seen as quite addictive. My favourite video game is Genshin Impact and Call of Duty. A lot of people would call me a geek or a nerd, but also they would say you're not focusing on going outside and getting fresh air, you're using your time indoors and not focusing on other responsibilities again. I would say it definitely did affect my mental health because video games are a way for me to put my time into something that I enjoy rather than being stressed over something else, especially after a busy day.
I'm Andy Milinite. I am a research manager at Opinium and I lead the gaming team. Opinium is a sort of a multi-methodology, multi-industry research agency. We work across sort of 4 key areas, sort of research areas. So we do brand and communications work, and that can be in any industry from sort of telecoms through to, financial services through to gaming. So our gaming team are all sort of super engaged with the industry anyway, and care about video games and esports and everything surrounding that. So it's kind of really a passion piece from our team.
I play video games because it helps me de-stress after a stressful day. For example, at university with a lot of assignments and work to do, video games are a way for me to enjoy my time after having a stressful day. I think video games are a good way to help mental health. It's just fun. Like, everyone needs a bit of fun, and video games is just fun.
Are there any points where you think video games have affected you negatively?
Not really. I would say that sometimes I think I do spend more time than I should playing video games, but I wouldn't say that has necessarily affected me negatively. I'm still happy and it still makes me feel good when I'm playing video games, so I'd just say maybe spend less time playing them.
There is an existing opinion about what gamers look like. We actually asked people to kind of tell us what they think gamers look like. What is your typical gamer? And there is a lot of existing sort of bias around that. People thinking that someone who's a gamer basically lives in a basement and and never sees the light of day. But the fact is that that's changing a lot. We know that in lockdown, so last year in 2020, we've got a piece of research that we did back then, and it told us that the gaming population, so the people who play video games, increased by 63%. So whilst in the past, gaming used to be catered only to a very small sliver of the population, actually a lot of people in the UK game, and it's amounting to sort of almost half of people who game to some extent.
Everyone in my family around me played video games, so I was growing up playing video games with my family, especially my brother. Me and my little brother would play like 2-player games together, and it's nice to see now that as well there's a lot of 4-player video games as well, so the more the merrier, and all these different types of computers being made. So for example, me and my brother, we used to play on the GameCube, which is like a really small controller and very old, and the graphics were not as great either. And now seeing all these new games and computers being made, and as many people can join, and the graphics are really good, the stories are getting better, the games are getting better. There's different types of games. You've got like RPG, action, and also like murder mysteries, which is really cool. There's just so many different things that I think we didn't have when we were younger. So it's really cool to see more being made.
The reason why the more you game, the better your mental health is, I think can be attributed to the fact that people tell us that it brings them a sense of enjoyment. It allows them to escape the real world, get away from bad news and, a really hard day at work and that kind of stuff. So it's a really great way to unwind, while at the same time kind of keeping your mind busy and potentially connecting with people.
Like, gaming is something that people become passionate about, and it is also a career. It can become a career, and like I said as well, it does help mental health. And I think kids at a young age can still suffer from bad mental health issues. It's just not kind of looked upon and like investigated enough. And I feel like gaming is a way for the younger generation to be able to de-stress, even if they don't really have that much stress as a lot of adults do. They still have that kind of aspect of stress because of school and stuff, and again, gaming is an outlet for them. So I think it is good. I would say it's more addictive for little kids because games, it's new, it's a new gadget, and kids like to fidget with things, and I feel like it's very interesting. So I would say you have to be careful with the time spent, because they can't really control it sometimes, but yeah.
So overall, I think you see video games as a positive thing.
Yeah, very positive.
Amelia O'Brien, Southwest Londoner.
So games have a really bad connotation, and tell me the advantages that have now.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I think video games especially are notoriously known for having quite a few disadvantages, but I think it's important to definitely look at the advantages and the positives. When I was talking to Livy, actually, one game she mentions particularly is a game created by a Chinese video game company called MiHoYo called Genshin Impact. And quite a big part of Genshin is the aspect of open worlds and joining people's worlds. And in that sense, it's a really good way to make friends, because you're not only adding your friends, how you'd add them maybe on Facebook or Instagram by their name or sort of their ID or whatever it is. You can also join sort of strangers, and if they're sort of a similar world ranking to you, that's how you get to make connections with both your friends already that but also strangers. And then Andy, as well as Olivia, or Livy for short, mentioned that a really big advantage is taking that break from the real world. Like you and me and everyone, like we always have some sort of stress that's sort of always like lingering over us. And I think video games where it's sort of unrealistic world or surreal world, or like just so different from what happens in real life, really gives people an opportunity to take a break. So I think those two especially are really good advantages.
So you spoke about the benefits of gaming. How did you initially get into gaming yourself?
So back when Toys R Us was still a franchise, which I'm very sad that it's left our streets. My parents at the age, I think around the age of 10, got me my first Nintendo DS Lite, which at the time was sort of Nintendo's current most popular sort of gaming console. And from there, they bought me a couple games. Some of them were based off of franchises such as CSI, which is obviously the crime show, and then House, which is the doctor medicine show. So from there, around the age of 10 was when I first got my gaming console. And actually, because it was such a long time ago, stuff like chargers for the console, they've got I forget the name, it's sort of like a stylus pen that you can use on the console itself. They're quite easy to get. So when I lost my charger, when I lost my pen, I was able to replace them and actually get my Nintendo working again. And yeah, evidence of me having it almost 10 years ago is definitely there, because I have some really awkward and funny photos of me pulling faces. But yeah, that was my introduction.
Well, obviously games has been with us for a very long time. How has the industry developed throughout the years?
So Livy mentions it, but quite a big part, obviously, as technology develops in all sorts of industries, medicine, science, etc., gaming is also privy to that as well. Sort of the creation of new gaming consoles, and as I mentioned, Nintendo especially branched out from sort of having, DS Lites into Switches and making things more accessible for people. Genshin is actually another example where originally started out as a mobile and PC game, and now it's available on PlayStation, Xbox, and I think they were talking about bringing it to the Switch as well, which would be quite a cool development. But the technological side of things, where like people are able to get customizations and get their own consoles and that sort of thing, is definitely a really big thing. But also, women in gaming is another rising trend. I mentioned at the beginning now that 50%, so quite literally half of people who game are female, which when I was talking to Andy, she mentioned is a really big prevalent factor. As well as this, she also mentioned that older people and adults as well are also getting into gaming, and they claim that it's a really good way for them to bond with their children. So I think technologically, and also seeing women in gaming, seeing characters that you can relate to, or like she looks like me. Games such as The Sims actually allows you to customize your own characters, and in that way you can also make them look like yourself. So I think both technologically and sort of identities and helping people discover if people look like them, act like them, etc., are two ways in which gaming is constantly developing, and I imagine it will probably continue to develop.
So you spoke there about different types of games, etc. And what games would you suggest to someone who wants to start getting into the gaming?
Yeah.
thing?
So I mentioned earlier, sort of stresses from life. Like it's really important to, even if it isn't gaming, to have a sort of hobby that allows you to break away from whatever's going on. I'd really suggest Animal Crossing, which is sort of another open world type of game where you start off with sort of an empty world, and you have villagers that join your world, and again you can join other people's worlds. You can decorate a house, you can grow plants, you can fish, like you can do all sorts of things. And I think because it's so colorful as well, it's originally made for sort of a younger audience, but I think adults just the same can get into it. It gives you a very therapeutic sort of sense. And I'd say actually Sims as well. I think a lot of people know about The Sims. Sims is another really good example, which, as I mentioned before, you can customize the characters and make them look like yourself. Again, sort of identity. And then the only other thing I'd say is, as I mentioned before with CSI and House, definitely just look into what franchises you're into, what you're a fan of, and see if a game exists, and then just go from there. Because franchises tend to develop like version 1, version 2, version 3, and they're just sort of releasing them a lot. So there's probably always constant updates and that sort of thing. So I think looking for a franchise that you're into is another really good starting place as well.
Right. We obviously mentioned before that games have that bad connotation. What would you say to the people that are listening to us that still believe this is bad?
So I was once someone who believed that way. My brother especially, he's been gaming for a lot, obviously you can imagine, a lot longer than I have, and I'd constantly be woken up by him in the morning shouting and screaming at his monitor, and because of that I developed sort of this is really frustrating. But I think the most important thing I'd say is for you to have an open mind, and because I was in that situation, by allowing myself to explore the world of gaming a little bit more and try it out myself, that's what changed my perspective. So I think having an open mind is especially important, and then like see if your friends are playing it as well, because I think doing stuff with friends is always so much better. So yeah, having an open mind and playing with friends, I think, are what I'd say two of the most important things.
Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you. And finally today, our Sport Next and our sports editor, Logan, has been looking at the Women's Euros and what to expect.
He went to Hasle Women's Training Facility and spoke to the first team manager and a player. Here's his report.
Taken centre stage in southwest London next summer, with the Euros scheduled to take place and Brentford confirmed to be one of the venues. I spoke to the Hounslow Women first team manager and a senior player to discuss the women's game and how the Euros will inspire young girls to take up football.
My role at the club, I'm the women's first team manager and have been for a number of years, obviously as Hounslow. This is our third season as an independent women's club, but I myself have been involved in women's football for over 20 years now. At all different levels, from girls right through to senior women's, and it's something that I'm really passionate about, women's football. That's why I think I've stayed involved in it for so long. The teams in WSL1 obviously can speak of like Chelsea, Arsenal, you know, Man City, the things that they've done, the things they've done in Europe. So that in itself is going to inspire girls, women to want to go and watch football. And I'm sure, you know, that they're talking about the predicted crowds. I mean, they've sold a hell of a lot of tickets so far for the tournament, and I'm sure that as we get closer to that, it's going to ramp up even more. And that can only be good for the whole game. I just hope that they don't leave behind the rest of the game, because obviously you've got the top of the pyramid, but everyone knows if you want a strong pyramid and you want something sustainable, you need to build from the bottom up. And the only way you're going to do that is by investing in the grassroots game and the levels just above the grassroots as well, that feed directly into tiers 1 and 2. And I'm sure the Euros are going to inspire many young girls to start playing, which hopefully will be a good thing for those clubs at a lower level, or your girls' wildcat sessions, your local community sessions. You know, get involved in those sessions as early as possible, start learning the basics, and then from there you get signposted to a grassroots club where you can start playing regular football either on a Saturday or a Sunday.
So my role at the club is I'm a senior player for Hounslow Women First Team. Essentially I support the management team to support players and just really have a good group feel going on during the season. I think the women's game in general is in a really good trajectory, so everyone can see the quality's going up, but of course there's always room for improvement, and I think the improvement comes from sort of grassroots footballs and lower tiers, because ultimately, you know, if the first top 2 tiers are you know, really high standard and the rest aren't, ultimately you're catering for a really small amount versus the rest. I think the Euros are a fantastic platform in general, and it really does highlight the quality that we have in this country. I think one of the things that we do need to focus on is improving the grassroots levels to ensure we have more than just 2 tiers of elite footballers. And the only way really to do that is support sort of community clubs like ours and independent clubs like ours to get funding in where we're not necessarily supported by a men's team. And that's one of the real key things in women's football, is that women's teams that are supported by men's teams have the financial backing and other teams don't, and therefore it's having that awareness of how do you get that funding, you know, how can we improve our playing facilities, how do we improve our, you know, everything basically, from physios, coaches and just players in general.
It's clear to see that women's football is starting to receive better recognition, but there are still underlying issues with funding and support for independent and community clubs just like Hounslow that needs to be prioritised for the next generation of women footballers. This has been your reporter Logan Forbes for South West Londoner.
I haven't got the final page.
So what are your thoughts on women's games after speaking to people involved?
Yeah, so I came away with the impression that the women's game is currently favoured towards the more elite clubs, so your likes of Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City, rather than your clubs like Hounslow, who simply don't have the financial backing from a men's team, just like those clubs do. And ultimately, it's making the women's game an uneven playing field, and it's making it harder for teams like Hounslow to actually be successful.
So what steps can be taken to improve the women's game?
Yeah, so the women's game, it's gaining more awareness and it's got more eyes in it than it ever has done before. But there's always room for improvement, especially when you consider like the grassroots side of it. Grassroots is where it all starts and where it draws in the young girls to start playing. So if there was more kind of awareness raised about that, I think the women's game overall will be much better.
Right. So, sorry. So when it comes to women's game, like playing football, it's not as well known as when it's male playing. What can it be done to remove the disparity of funding?
Yes. So there's a clear disparity of funding between the men's and women's game. The men's game has got so much more money because of the owners, and it's also down to the exposure and excitement of men's football compared to the women's game. TV companies, like commercially, the men's game is much more attractive to pump money into because it's got a bigger audience, it's got a bigger reach compared to the women's game. The women's game's slowly building up to that, but it's nowhere near the men's level yet. An example of a funding issue in the women's game is the Coventry women's team, who are going into liquidation. So these players have had their contracts terminated and people at the club have lost jobs. So it's a pretty sad story when you think of it, because it's purely down to a lack of funding. The FA have a criteria which allows certain clubs to compete in the WSL and Championship, but it is favoured towards the clubs with the money, because I think when I was speaking to Martino, the manager, you have to have a certain stadium size, and it's very technical stuff, but you need the money. And I think for the women's game to bridge that gap, there needs to be organic investment, because there needs to be better equipment for the lower tiers and grassroots of the women's game. There needs to be better facilities available to them, and that's just to make it a level playing field in the women's game. So I think there's a long way to go to bridge the gap between the men's and women's.
And so, as a man, what was your reason behind talking about this subject of women's football?
Yeah, so I thought it's definitely important to continue the awareness around it. It's growing all the time, and although it's growing a bigger audience, there are still underlying issues, just like the funding that we spoke about, that needs to be spoken about, especially with the Euros coming up.
Knowing this issue when it comes to women playing football, but obviously men are, have a much higher audience. Why is it important for South West London audience?
Well, like I said, the Euros are coming up this summer, and Brentford is going to be one of the venues. So this gives a chance for the South West London audience to go to these games and be inspired by watching these games. And I also think it's got a great opportunity to have a lasting impression on these young girls who actually go to watch these games. And hopefully it leads to them becoming the future generation of women footballers and continue the growth of the women's game.
Thank you, Logan.
Okay, so just before we go today, we've got some live reaction coming in to our reports today. The Black Culture Market, which we featured earlier in the programme, they've said great and thank you for featuring us today in your programme. And then regarding the gaming story, we had Amelia, who was our reporter for that. Rebecca has commented and she said, I feel like gaming got me closer to my friends. Playing games together in the evenings, we open up about what's going on in our lives. It's definitely therapeutic. Thank you to everyone for getting involved on today's programme, and your comments are very much appreciated. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you very much for watching.
For more stories from across South West London, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you and goodbye.